10 points, I believe, is all.
Well,
which was pretty good.
That didn't do anything to hurt your program here, did it?
No.
Because what was the attraction for an athlete to come and play with us and with you? Because there was little or no scholarship help, was there?
No, I think it was primarily love of the game. It really was, and that they had played, you know, in high school, and those things are kind of contagious. When you once play, you get the feeling, and you continue. But the recruitment was difficult to recruit players, you know, because if the other school offered them much of anything, why, you know, you were second line.
And were lots of the schools you were playing starting to get into helping now?
Recruitment, yeah. At that, they started to get into they weren't controlled quite as much by the conferences.
I was wondering about the control. They could do about anything they wanted to.
Yeah, they had a lot of alumni support, you know, and it wasn't really moderated too much, you know. They're on their own.
You know, I think one thing we ought to pause and do, Don, we can watch a lot of basketball on television today, pro basketball, which gets into the hundreds and then some in scoring, and we can watch a lot of college and even high school tournaments and women's basketball. Well, the game you started to describe, the rules when you started to coach were really different, and people think it'd be kind of interesting to tell one of the reasons, at least, why the scores were like 20 to 15 and 30 to 20 and things like that. Go through the rules a little. I think that's very interesting.
Well, I think one thing, in those days, there was more of a emphasis on defense and offense, you know, if you could keep the team from scoring. And there have been times, and even down at the state tournament, where the scores were, you know, like 6 to 8 or something like that.
Right.
But it wasn't very interesting to the spectators because now you have to bring that ball up, you know, within a certain time, or up to the middle of the court, or else it's turned over to the other team. And now, a lot of they're debating now whether they should have the ruling where after a certain number of seconds you have to shoot, you know. So the change has been from defense to offense.
Weren't you doing a lot of jump balls too?
Oh yes. At first there, after every basket, of course this was in the late 30s, so after every basket they brought it back for a center jump, you know.
Wow,
and that's not too
time-consuming.
Yeah, that's not too entertaining to the crowd though. So I think everything now is geared toward putting that ball in the hoop, and that's what the crowd wants to see. They want to see that. They don't. I don't think they appreciate. Well, they appreciate good defensive plays on the board and that, but not a stalling type of a thing, you know.
Well, are you suggesting, Don, I think you are, that really most of the rule changes that have come about have been for encouraging fan support?
I think
not for the players necessarily.
This is in my opinion, you know, to make it interesting, make it exciting for the fans. Football, too, the razzle-dazzles, the passes, the T formation type thing. All this is, in my day, why we would kick sometimes on the second and third down, and
it was defense in football,
you're waiting for the breaks and that. They don't do that now, and we never thought of running the ball from our 2-yard line. We'd all had heart attacks if the quarterback would have called a running play or a pass play from way back in your deep end zone, you know. So it's a different style, and it's more entertaining. I have to admit that the stands, they like to be entertained, and scoring is what they would come to see.
Now, the basketball team, as you had it in the 40s there, involved probably 10, 12 young men, right?
Yeah, we used to have carry a squad of 12.
And
what
was the lineup of schools for the varsity? Who did you play in those days? We were not in the North Central then.
No.
We weren't in any conference, were we?
No, we were freelancing then, but we played some pretty good teams. We played Bradley University and Utah, and we played some smaller schools like Peru and Nebraska Wesleyan, and I think we even played a little school, I think it's still going, Tarkhill and that. But we would go on a trip. We played DePaul and in fact, we beat DePaul University in 1940, I guess it was, and the year before that, they'd been in the Garden. And we were fortunate, lucky, I suppose you'd say. But we put on pretty good brand of ball.
Now, were all the young men on the team from Omaha almost in those days?
I would say 75% of our players were from Omaha, and the others were from over in Iowa. You know, no great distance.
But all these young men were really here because they wanted to go to school, and this was really an extracurricular activity, wasn't it?
We lost more. I think we probably lost more students though by scholastically than they do now.
Oh, was that any reason why that might happen?
I don't know. We never had tutors for one thing, like they do now, and we didn't have the selection of courses that you have. You had to take so much math, so much science.
A foreign language.
Right. In fact, you had to. When I was a student, now I'm talking about, when I was you had to pass a foreign language proficiency test in addition to an English proficiency, and so we lost some of our ball players because they went by the scholastic hit the trail by not making the grade.
And that really hurt all
Yeah, right. When you don't have that many to begin with.
Yeah. Some of the names that come to mind as you remember your days of coaching basketball. Some of the standout boys that really did well for you and for the university.
Oh, I would have to say Joe Arenas was an outstanding ball player. Don Clausen was an outstanding ball player.
Any relation to our current athletic director, Connie? For women's athletic?
No, but he has a son. I don't know if that's his son that's outstanding ball player or not, the one that went to Benson. I'm not sure about that. Then we had also Bob Mackey, who you probably have heard of.
Yes, indeed.
He was a good ball player, a good ball handler, and I think he still has the record for free throws in a single game or a single season. Yeah.
How many? Remember?
Well, I don't recall, but as I recall that record book, that's one of the records that's still intact. But I can't think right now who.
Well, you've mentioned some good names.
Was a good man. But we did have, we showed up for all the games and put on a pretty good game for them.
We're running out of tape, so we'll need to pause again, and we'll reload and come back and visit some more here on Reflections in Time with Don Pflasterer. A few moments ago when we changed tapes, we're back at it in review in the summer of 1982, and I'm visiting on this fourth videotape with Don Pflasterer, who's just recently retired from our University of Nebraska at Omaha. We've been talking for the last 50 minutes or so, not about the University of Omaha at all, but the school which really preceded it, where he spent much of his life as a student, and then later as a staff and a faculty member. Well, Don, we've been talking for a good part of our time when we relate to the university of your life as a coach. One thing or so before we leave that, as you look back on basketball, football, your assistantships, and your head coaching time at the University of Omaha in the 40s there, what perhaps, if you can remember it, was the most satisfying moment, the thing you enjoyed the most, the thing gave you a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment as related to coaching? What did you like about coaching? Let's put it that way.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's just the... We had such a wonderful rapport between the players and the coaches then, you know. It was fun. There wasn't so much pressure maybe there wasn't as much pressure to win, although we liked to win. We played to win. But they were outstanding individuals and fun to be around. And we had fun in practice, and we had fun on trips, and it was just the informal relationship that we had. I suppose you get that in a classroom. It's not quite possible to get that, I don't believe. I look back on it, and some of the players that I had, I still see, and we still talk about the good old days, so I guess they must have been.
I think there's been a suggestion underlying what you've been saying as you went along. You emphasized here just a moment ago, sports were fun.
That's right.
Let's take one more shot at that sports area before we leave it. Sports, you suggested this too, have changed a lot. What's changed? The players, are they different? Are the relationship with the schools and the clubs different now? Is it not as much fun, do you think?
I think there's more pressure put on. There's more pressure put on the players, and
More push for winning?
I think so. It's of course a lot of them they want to go ahead and continue it into the pros, and it's a business. No, we had very few students that or very few players that went that way. Although I think some of them had the capabilities of doing so, but now I think it's more of a business. It's everything is more cut and dried. There's pressure to win, and pressure on the coaches, and it just kind of seeps down, I think, to the players.
Well, there came a time in your life when the decision was made to do something else. You'd coached and you'd played for many, many years before the war, in high school up at North, back at the University of Omaha, and you came back after being at Harlan and then started up coaching, assisting, and head coaching. But those were a lot of years, and most of them fairly happy. Why'd you change?
Well, I thought about it a long time and made the decision. And after I made the decision, I wasn't sure it was the right decision, but I thought I would give it a try and figure I could always go back to it. But after I got into administration, I liked it, and I had the privilege of working with outstanding people in that area. I had in 1952 is when I made my move.
And you moved to what?
I moved well, we called them Dean of Men then. They're no longer called Dean of Men, but we also had a Dean of Students, and that was Dr. McGregor, J.B. McGregor. He was a great man, and we worked together until his retirement. I think he was there about 8 years, and he promoted me from an assistant to associate in that, and I think I enjoyed the work with him so much that that was the one reason that I stayed.
He helped make the job.
Right, and he made the change a lot easier for me.
That is quite a change, though, to leave the court and the field, isn't it?
Yeah, and I missed it at first, but I continued to do some officiating, refereeing, and that, keeping some contact with the sport, and so I didn't cut myself off completely. And of course, I was quite a fan then. I don't think I missed many games in those at that time. I attended everything and used to go out and watch them practices and things like that. But I never regret the change that I made to get in administration. Well, it was enjoyable. It was frustrating, but at times, but every job is.
Well, when we talk about a dean of men at the University of Omaha, we could draw a question mark over that. We didn't have dormitories, we didn't have this, we didn't have that, but we had some leadership and rule-making organization really for the students. So what did a dean of men do in those days? What was your job?
They were deeply involved in the activity program, the student activity program.
What was the activity program like?
Oh, they had their holidays, their festive times. They had their dinner dances. They had their student council affairs and the interfraternity council and Panhellenic, and
the fraternities and sororities were going strong now.
They were very strong. They were very strong then, and had really good recognition too. I recall that we went to a national convention, and 2 years in a row, and we got the top award for interfraternity council, and which was pretty good to come from a small school.
Yeah.
And that was judged on things that had been done during the year and that programs.
You mentioned earlier about community assistance, that they were big on that. Excuse me. What were some of the things that these groups started to get involved with?
They were very active in things like cancer drives or heart fund drives or Help Week projects and helping the city, on cleanup days and that type of thing, which I don't believe. I think there are groups that do that, but I don't necessarily think it's university groups that do that. And of course, we had the Dean of Men had the discipline, and that was not we didn't have a lot of problems.
Well, we didn't have dormitories. What
Yeah.
kind of problems did you face from time to time? What were some of the problems that you...
Oh, you would always have the things like classroom activities of, you know, cheating, and of course you always have drinking problems, and
they would relate to parties that were...
That's right.
held.
I don't know how many times we've had those dogs, those ceramic dogs that are over in Council Bluffs from that RCA building. I don't know how many times we've had those on the front stoops out there at the university. But then that's what I call clean fun.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
We call them up and tell them to come get them, but we had a bunch. I think our rules were a little more strict then.
Yeah. What are some of the strict rules you recall?
Well, sponsorship, you know. If they had an event, why, we felt that we had to have somebody there in the person of faculty or that as a chaperone or whatever you want to call them. And I think we overdid that, really. And
were most of the functions held on campus in those days?
No, well, campus and hotels. A lot of the things were, but they would, you know, my first sponsorships, they always put a flower on you, you know, and I always thought that was a way of, you know, presenting you with something, but that was just a badge of, you know, who to let, watch out.
Identify.
Yeah, identify you. And they put you in a room somewhere and bring you those cokes, but we had very few problems in regard to discipline. But we had dress codes and things like that.
Yeah, what was the dress code?
Oh, they were. As I looked at them now, they were pretty stupid.
What sorts of things?
Well, like they wouldn't let you go in the library with slacks on, for instance. Women couldn't wear slacks in the library. And I recall this one gal, so she went in the restroom and took her slacks off. She had a raincoat on, and so she just took her slacks off. And I'm not sure that's any better. But we did. I think that was one of the positive things that the students, through their committees, got rid of that dress code and that.
When did student government, as such, as we have it now on our campus and most campuses, when did that really get rolling?
Well, it was really, I would say, in the 70s, when they got active, I would say in 65, around in there. And they wanted to be on all committees, you know. And sometimes this was good, sometimes it was bad. I remember we had a committee, a Student Center Policy Committee of students, and it was all they wanted to do is, you know, heckle the faculty and this administration a little bit. It got to such a stage that they were trying to tell us how much pepper to put in food, you know, in the cafeteria and stuff. It got pretty asinine. But by and large, those committees that had students on represented, they were pretty thoughtful and used good judgment. A few radicals, you always have them, that are just trying to stir things up, you know. But this was the way of life during those times on all campuses.
Yeah.
We had very few problems.
You're talking about the 60s now, pretty much, aren't
right.
we? Yeah.
We had one sit-in one time, but there was nobody ever hurt, or we had no really vandalism or anything.
Yeah.
But it was a time of adjustment for all universities.
But as a dean of men and involved in student policy and so on, you did have some problems.
Yeah. Well, it just got to be where we thought, well, maybe the rule isn't right, but until it changed, you know, you got to stick by it. You know, you just can't give up everything. And I think this is where we ran in this interchanging of redoing some of the things. There were some...
like the nickname?
Yeah. There were some things that... I think there was more positive, more good came out of it than bad, but there were some things, I think, that some mistakes that we made.
Did you like being Dean of Men?
Well, I enjoyed it very much, and then when Dean McGregor retired, why, I was, Dr. Bale was president at that particular time, and he gave me a try at it, and then I was Dean of Students for...
About what year was that, Don?
1960.
Well, then you really became the head of all student activity during that very turbulent period.
Yeah,
What are some of the things you remember that stand out in those years? Or people, or things, or happenings? You mentioned the sit-in, I know, but were things starting to change? Were students starting to really flex their muscle a little now?
Yeah, they wanted to be heard, and the Student Senate probably changed as more than any other governing body.
Is that so?
Yeah, they changed to where, well, they even changed where they got paid, you know, and things like that. And some people, some administrators reacted unfavorably against that, but they did put a lot of time in, and as you know, I guess they're still sitting on the Board of Regents. And that was a thing that I don't know if they have a vote or not. I don't believe they have a vote. They have a say, you know, and to listen to.
Do you think that's good? Do you like that as you look at the changing scene?
Yeah, I think on the equation there's more pluses and minuses on it.
Do you think college life generally helps a young man or woman in the best sense to grow up a little?
Oh, I'm sure of that. I'm sure of that. There are some students that adjust more readily to their freedom than others, and they handle it much better.
Now, after you left your job as Dean of Students, things changed at the university, didn't they? Now we're moving into the merger and things like that. What do you remember about the merger, Don?
Well, there was some decision, there was some question, I think, in a lot of people, the old-timers' minds, if it was the right move. You know, they thought that they were losing a lot of their personal touch with that they were just going to be shoved aside and dictated to by whom, I'm not sure. But there's no doubt that the merger had a plus effects on the university.
Were you unhappy about it at first yourself?
No, I really had no strong feelings one way or the other. I could see that if we were going to do some things, well, we had to have money. In order to get the money, we could not do it the way we were doing it.
We were getting tight on money, weren't we?
Right. You see, we couldn't even build a building unless you had the money before. You had to save, and then the only reason that we got the Student Center was because Eugene Epley came out and after the library was completed and gave a check for, what, $750,000, and so he bought the library, so to speak, and that gave us money to buy another building. So the merger enabled us financially to do more things, building-wise and faculty-wise. So I think that you lost, you probably, when you get large, though, you lose a lot of the togetherness or the daily rapport that you would have with one another. You see each other at a meeting, and even now the departments are so much bigger than even the colleges were then, you know, that I'm not sure that everybody knows what's going on. I think the line of communication breaks down and somewhere, and doesn't filter down to everybody, and you're not a part of it. You're apart from it, and you have to read about it in the paper to find out what's going on, maybe even in your own little, or in your own bailiwick, you know. I think that's the bad part of it.
Well, we want to keep going for a bit longer, Don, and talk about some of the years that you've had at the university in the period when I suppose it really expanded as much as it ever had, just grew by leaps and bounds. You mentioned a moment ago on the last tape that the merger turned out to be a good thing in terms of paying the bills and the growth of the university and things like that. Before we do that, I think we ought to pause. We're sitting here in the summer of 1982 in Don Pflasterer's beautiful backyard where he and Jean lived. And if you heard some noises in the background as we record this, it just points up the time of year. It's about halfway over. It's almost July 4th. And occasionally you'll hear a firecracker, and it's not that they're trying to bomb us out or anything. Don, you were coach of basketball, and then you were the dean of students after being dean of men. Now what was the year and what happened next?
Well, we had a change when Chancellor President Roskins came, and they kind of redid the Student Affairs office,
Yes.
and also some other offices, counseling and testing and that. And they came in with a vice chancellor for student affairs, I guess. Do they call him that, or vice chancellor for? I'm not sure. That's not the right word that they gave him. And I remained on there, but my title was changed to a coordinator for student development. I'm not sure what that meant. But
yeah, I was going to ask you what that meant.
I think I seemed I was doing the same thing.
But there was a vice chancellor that came on the scene that essentially was doing what you'd been doing.
Yes.
As Dean of Student Personnel,
well,
right?
You're right. The Dean of Students, you know, he was over such things as the placement office, the registrar's office, the counseling, testing, and admissions, and student health, and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that did not change as far as the areas of responsibility was concerned, except that they broke it up, and he really had more people helping him do the job.
Yeah. You had little or no staff other than the secretary, did you?
No, that's about right. And we had, but we had meetings with. There was a coordinator of student development, which I was.
That's you.
And then there was a coordinator, Dr. Olson, special service or whatever the title they gave him. And then there was a coordinator for minority affairs.
Yeah.
And we were. And then we had a director of the student center. Now we were the ones that would meet with Vice Chancellor Beer.
Yeah.
And
at one time I was involved with some of you too with the radio and television.
That's
under
right.
that bailiwick too.
That's right. And there seems to be there's somebody
Audio
else in
visual.
there. Audio visual. Ron Pullen.
Right.
Was in that.
Right.
And these were the areas that were still in business, and but. They were kind of segregated in some respect of they're still responsible to the Vice Chancellor. Duties, I guess, didn't change really that much.
So you were still doing many of the things you'd done before in relating to students, right?
That's right.
Okay, how many years did this last, Don?
This goes...
Now we're after the merger and we're getting into the 70s, right?
Right, and I'm not sure when, how long I was as coordinator, and then I was Don Skaheen and I kind of changed jobs.
Yeah.
I went over to the Student Center as the Director of Student Center and still coordinator for student development, and was there for a while, and then...
Running the Student Center too?
Running the Student Center, and then I came back. Well, no, this is when we changed jobs. Skaheen was the assistant to the Vice Chancellor, and he came over to the Student Center, and then I went over as Dr. Beer's assistant.
I see.
And then I remained there. I knew that I had hoped that I could retire when I was 62. That was my plans originally, and so as that time approached, there was a job as the what do we want to call him? The ombudsman. I never thought I'd
always hard to say.
Anyway, I applied for that job and was selected that, and the last 2.5 years or so I was the university ombudsman.
And that person is really involved with students' personal problems, right?
Well, not only students, but staff and faculty.
Yeah, anybody.
Yeah,
that has
it's a very interesting job, but you don't see many happy people because they all come there with a gripe. That's why they're there.
What sort of gripes are they coming with, or were they coming with?
Almost the students were because of something classroom thing, grades. They thought they were being dealt with unfairly, or something the professor did or didn't do that they thought he should have, and things like that. Staff was mainly, maybe their hours had been changed, or they were having trouble with their supervisor, and faculty, it was mainly on promotion and tenure and that type of thing. But you see, there was one good thing about the ombudsman. You were not, you were responsible to the chancellor, and you didn't have a boss otherwise. You were independent. and you could, not that they respected me greatly, but they respected the position, and you got pretty speedy action on things.
Oh, I'm quite sure they respected you too, Donald. Go ahead.
Well, what we try to do is solve it, if we could, without going into the formal grievance committees and that. And we
tried to help solve the problems.
Yeah, we were pretty successful. I think we had some of them that went the full route, but by and large, it was an interesting job. I enjoyed it, but it's a type of a job you wouldn't want to do for the rest of your life. So it's kind of a burnout job, and it was frustrating at times.
When we talk about the rest of your life, let's come back to that and talk a little about retirement. But before we do that, you've been with the university one way or another since the 30s, really. And people have come and gone, lived and died. There have been friends, colleagues, co-workers, bosses. There's so many, we don't expect that you can name them all. We don't necessarily have the time for that, of course. But there were so many people. You mentioned Dean McGregor, that was so influential in your life and important to you. And I imagine there are a number of other people that stand out, thinking not only of yourself, but of the university and its growth and change. And if you're going to pick sort of an all-American team of, related to our University of Omaha and University of Nebraska-Omaha, who were some of the people and why they relate to you and to our university that were really important?
Well, I would say that this takes back to student days and also when I was out there as an employee, that one of the most outstanding professors, in my opinion, was Dr. Leslie Garlow, who was in biology. He was well thought of, well known, well respected, and another person that we have all heard of and known sometime. In fact, he's still teaching. He's retired twice, once from the university and once from Creighton, Dr. Wardle in English. He would have to be one of the great people. Dr. Nell Ward, who was, I remember her at the old building I was telling you about, North 24th, teaching chemistry. She was an outstanding person. And Dr. James Earl, Jim Earl, in mathematics, he was a good person, outstanding person.
He had a lot to do with the growth and change of departments in the university too, didn't he? In terms of the life of the university.
And you couldn't help, you have to mention Dr. Wilford Payne. Everybody that was at the university remembers him. There were times I didn't understand what he was saying, but he said it so wonderfully that it didn't really matter. But he was an outstanding professor in the humanities and philosophy. And of course, we shouldn't, I wouldn't want to forget Dr. Mabel L, who was president there for a great number of years, and a very good friend of mine. He was well, I don't know how to say, just he's not difficult to work for, but you sure knew who the boss was. And I think that he was very good for the university at that time. He may, and he admits this himself, would have maybe a difficult time being a president under the modern day philosophies, but he was an outstanding person and a leader in education and in higher education, I should say. I've always respected him and still do. I think he had a birthday last week. I don't know, I think maybe 84 years old.
Yeah, so in 1982, our president, for whom the Student Center has been named, 84 years old.
Yeah, and those are some of the people that whenever I think of the university, I think there are so many of them, though.
How about some of the people who worked with you?
Oh, I've always been fortunate to have a good staff.
Yes, you did.
I would be amiss if I didn't mention Thelma Engel, who was worked as associate director of the Student Center. She was an outstanding person, did a wonderful job, Old friend Bill Gearbrock, who
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's officially given the title of the registrar, but he's been there for 30-some years, and he worked for me in different capacities. And oh, there's just so many of them that Dr. Gail Olson has been a personal friend for a long time, and is still out there. He was head of the counseling and guidance. But those were good years, and although I'm enjoying retirement, I still have fond memories of Omaha U and University of Nebraska at Omaha.
Well said, Donald. Just a moment before we wind things up. Now we're sitting in this comfortable backyard in the summer of '82 on Old Westover Road, where you've lived with your good wife Jean and your daughters for many years. Retirement. You said a while ago that you kind of wanted to retire when you were 62. Well, you finally got to retire. Is it what you expected?
Oh yes, I didn't plan to do a lot, and I'm not. And I regulate my own schedule, and I'm really not bored. I don't know, people, they always say, well, what do you do? And I really don't know. I do a little cooking and do a little housework and do a little work in the yard and drink a couple beers once in a while. But I'm enjoying it.
Now, you're a great storyteller, and everyone who's known you and would watch this tape will say, when's going to tell one of his stories? Well, you mentioned a couple, but there's one that the producer of this Reflections Time, Tim Fitzgerald, has just reminded me we want you to tell about. Years ago, at least, we were heavily involved at this university in writing annual reports to our president, to our dean, to whomever. They were sometimes rather voluminous.
Right.
And there was a time in all of this when you stopped and said, hey, does anybody read this? Right? All right. Tell us that story.
Well, I guess since I've retired and they can't cut off my Social Security or anything, yeah, I would procrastinate on those annual reports quite a bit and leave it to the last minute. And they, as you say, they in my area, they had to have a lot of stuff in there. And I thought, well, I bet nobody ever reads this thing. So I thought one time I'm going to give it a test and try. So I just inserted somewhere in the middle of it a brownie recipe, you know. I just got it out of the cookbook and put a brownie recipe in there and thinking, well, let's see if anybody reads it. And I haven't heard to this day if anybody's used that brownie recipe. So I have a feeling that maybe that page was skipped anyway, but it was kind of fun anyway. It was a good recipe, as I remember.
Well, if you ever run into good brownies, it might be the person with the report in their file.
Right.
Now, as you look back on all these good years together with the rest of us out at the university, and then some, 30, 35, and more years, if you're going to pick one or two or three things that stand out most in your memory in the history of the university or your own life, what are the things that come to mind as you think of the old University of Omaha first, and then maybe University of Nebraska at Omaha? That's a tough one. Do what you can.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no... I think one of the things that I think about, and I really don't miss this, is I was commencement, director of commencement for 25 years. And it never failed that during commencement we'd have a problem. And we had some great problems during commencement. The organ wouldn't play, or the lights went out, had a power failure. We had one thing that was exceptionally funny is at this particular time we didn't have the entire class come up and get their diploma. We just selected the one from each college. And this one gal that came up, she must have misunderstood what I said, but instead of coming up the steps, she jumped up right up the platform, right in the middle of the platform, and almost, it was horrible. And I told the girl behind her to do the same thing, but luckily she didn't. Another time in commencement, we were going out, recessional, and one of the faculty members was talking to another one. He got confused. He didn't follow the usher, and he followed this group down to the men's room, and everybody behind him was following him down.
I think I remember part of that story.
Okay, that was a little confusing.
Yes.
But they were exciting days.
Yes, they were, Don. And it's been an exciting morning for us to visit with you, and I want to thank you very much for for letting us come and visit about your reflections on time at the university. We thank Don, and we hope that many of you will enjoy reflecting on the times of the university in this tape that we made in the summer of 1982. Your host has been Paul Borge.